Okay, in a previous video, we talked about lowering your attack surface and managing some security. And one of the things we talked about specifically was port 22 being OpenSSH. So just to recap real quick, I'm going to run the command sudo, actually, I don't even think I need to sudo it, netstat -tulpn, and this is going to show me everything that's currently opening and listening. So I'm going to do that again. Let me clear the screen to pop this up and make it easier to read. Whoops. I'm going to pipe that to grep, and I'm looking for port number 22, which is my OpenSSH server. When I look at that, I'm going to see TCP. I'm listening for anything on port 22, and I'm also listening for it on IPv6, anything on port 22. Now, that might be a little bit problematic because everybody in the world knows that port 22 is OpenSSH. And it might be that we want to get rid of that. And if it does, then we need to disable the OpenSSH daemon and just stop it from listening. But it also might be that we want to keep it, but we want to try to secure it a little bit better. So let's take a look at our configuration file. So I'm going to sudo nano /etc/ssh. There we go. /sshd_config. And this is my SSH config file, or my SSH daemon config file. And you're going to see a bunch of things are commented out. So one of them, we're talking about port 22. Okay, you'll see right here, that's commented out to use port 22. Well, I want to delete that comment, and I want to change that to port, let me do 10,022. So now when I rerun the SSH daemon, it's not going to listen on port 22, it's going to listen on port 10,022. Hopefully that'll make it so that people don't realize, hey, that's what this is. I can set the address family that I want it to listen to, v4, v6, which address I want it to listen to, and anything that's commented out just means it's going to be the default, okay? So if I remove the comment and change the values, then I'm changing it to a specific setting. For example, down here, I have a setting to permit root login. Well, I can change that permit root login, and I can say no. Let me try that again. Permit root login, no. And now root isn't going to be able to log into my SSH server. In fact, I can do this. I'm going to add another line here. I'm going to do allowed groups and SSH users. And that's only going to allow people to log in if they are a member of that SSH users group. And those are just a couple of quick things. But you can scroll down here and you can see a bunch of other settings. So this is going to do two things. Nobody can log, well, three things. Nobody can log in unless they're a member of the SSH users group. The root is not permitted to log in. And then it's going to be on port 1022. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to do Control O to write it and then Control X to exit. And then I'm going to restart my SSH. So it's systemctl restart SSH. And then I had to log in and do that. Says we had an error code. That's disconcerting. Systemctl status ssh dot service. Okay, and we actually have a failure, probably because I screwed up a config there. So let's come back here. Let's see, port 1022, allowed groups SSH users, permit root login. We set that to no. And this should be, I just found it, this is allow groups, not allowed groups. Okay, let's see if that fixes my problem. Control O, enter to write it out, Control X. Systemctl restart SSH. Log in. That looks better. Let's look at our status and bingo. Okay, we're up and running. Now, let's see if this worked. I'm going to do systemctl, whoops, not systemctl. I'm going to do netstat -tulpn, and again, I want to look for 22. Now, this should still find it because it finds a 22 here, but notice that my port number is now 10,022. So if I try to SSH to localhost, it's actually going to refuse the connection because by default it tries to connect to port 22. So that's going to block it for me. So I'm going to do SSH -L to log in, or let me do -L to set my login, and I'm going to log in as root. Remember, we blocked root. I'm going to do -port 10,022, and I'm going to go to localhost. Do you want to continue connecting to localhost? Yes. Okay, so now we added port 1022. That's now a valid connection for us. So we're going to put in our root password, and I'm going to type the wrong password accidentally. We'll wait for it to reject. Now I'm going to type the right password intentionally, and it's still blocking because we said root is not allowed to log in. No matter how many times I block the correct or type the correct password. So let me see if I can log in as me. So I'm going to do SSH-L, and I'm going to use my account -port 10,022 to localhost. And it's going to ask me to log in. I typed the wrong password again. Let me type the correct password. But again, it's going to block access because my account is not part of the SSH users groups. In fact, I don't even have an SSH users group. So I need to create one. So I'm going to do group add SSH users. Sudo group add SSH users. And that's going to add me, or add the group, and then I'm going to add myself. So it's sudo usermod -a capital G, so add to group SSH users, and I want to add me. So now, if I look at my groups, I should be part of, and that hasn't updated yet to show me that I'm part of the SSH users. All right, let's see if this works. That might not actually update just yet. Actually, you know what I can do? I can do a cat /etc/groups group. And here is SSH users and David. So it hasn't added that to my key yet, but that's okay. We're going to give this a shot and see if this works. So SSH-U or -L, so I'm going to log in as David. I'm going to use my port number 10,022, and I'm going to connect to localhost. Log in. And it's trying to log me in using my private key. Let me cancel the private key and do it via password, because I need to reset my password on my private key. There we go, I'm in. So, and it's telling me, now remember in a previous video we talked about seeing updates. So I logged in, and at login it tells me updates can be applied and system restart is required. So those are a couple of things you want to look at when you log in. But I'm in now, SSH'd to my local host using my new security settings. So different port number and different, or in a user that's been specifically allowed access to it. So exit out, and that's going to close my connection to localhost, and I am now back to my normal user. Okay, so there we go. Now there were a lot more settings in that SSHD_config file that you can play with to work with securing your OpenSSH connections even a little bit more. Specify IP address, specify address family, things like that. So But that should give you an idea of how we can use that sshd_config file to help secure our OpenSSH daemon on an Ubuntu server.